Back to President Trump and his fierce and R-rated back and forth with Stormy Daniels on Twitter. It might be dominating the headlines, but the president is making much bigger news that impacts all of our lives in two new interviews. He is blasting the Fed for raising interest rates too quickly while taking a swipe at the Fed chairman that he nominated, calling the Fed his biggest threat. He is also defending his family amid the special counsel's Russia investigation, calling out his former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, as a liar and a PR guy, questioning climate change and boasting his own, quote, instinct for science. I'm not sure what an instinct for science is. While firing off threats to Central American leaders over immigration. All of that happened on the day the president had no scheduled events. He was successful at keeping himself in the headlines, and that's what he loves to do. My panel back with me, former Senator Bob Torricelli and Bret Stephens. Okie doke. First, in an interview with Fox last night, he blasted his Fed chair, Jay Powell. Take a listen.
My biggest threat is the Fed, because the Fed is raising rates too fast, and it's independent, so I don't speak to him, but I'm not happy with what he's doing because it's going too fast, because you looked at the last inflation numbers, they're very low.
Okay, so help me out here, Senator. He also tweeted last night, stock market is up 548 points, and the jobs numbers are great. He then today said no one in any mainstream news covered the market. That is absolutely a lie, and we're doing it right here. So which is it? If the market dropped last week because of crazy loco Jay Powell, who's raising rates, then how is it that the market went back up yesterday? I'm pretty sure Jay Powell didn't lower rates.
But here's what I think that the president needs to understand. The reason, there's two reasons why the Fed is raising rates. One is concern about inflation. The other is concern about Donald Trump. The United States is going to have its first $1 trillion deficit. That means that if the country goes into a recession, we have two weapons to deal with a recession: fiscal and monetary policy. We are without fiscal policy. If we went into a recession tomorrow, we cannot go deeply into deficit spending to get out of it. We already spent the money. The other is cut interest rates. The Fed doesn't just fighting inflation. They want to get interest rates higher, so if the country goes inevitably into a recession in the next few years, they've got some weapon to counter it. That's cutting rates. To cut rates, you have to have a rate base higher. That's part of what they're doing. The reason they're doing it is Donald Trump on the tax cut.
Well, I think the senator's absolutely right, but there's another point that I think we should underscore here, which is that the independence of the Federal Reserve has been a sacrosanct political norm under both parties for as long as I can remember, whether the chairman was Paul Volcker or Alan Greenspan, and so on. And the attack on the independence of the Fed, the decision-making of the Fed, I think is an extraordinary piece of norms violation and institutional corrosion by the Trump administration. I guess we're getting used to it now. But this is really the road to Argentina. This is the road to countries that have ruined themselves through inflationary spirals when you try to own the decision-making of the independent authorities supplying money to the economy.
All right, I want to go to something President Trump talked about in his AP interview yesterday, the Russia investigation and his son Don Jr. and that Trump Tower meeting where he said, "My son is a good young guy." He's turning 41, just so you know. He did what every other person in Congress would do if someone came up to them, said, "Hey, I have information on your opponent," then heard it was about Hillary Clinton. They had a meeting, or he had a meeting with some people. The meeting became about a different subject, and they couldn't get out of the meeting fast enough. Is that explanation enough, or is it enough for the American people?
I think, having been through a few of these campaigns, someone comes up to you and says, "I have information on your opponent," you're taking the meeting.
Irrelevant of who it is?
If it's a foreign government, you probably don't. If the foreign government is telling you something that they're going to do, like tap into emails, that is illegal, not only do not take the meeting, if you're in the meeting, you get out as fast as you can and you call law enforcement. So yes, of course you take information on an opponent. But under these facts, if a member of my staff had come to me and said, "I got a good idea. A foreign government's got information on an opponent, and by the way, they think they can criminally go tap into their emails," you wouldn't take that meeting in a million years, and I don't know anyone who would.
Okay, so let's take ourselves out of the this isn't the right thing to do, no one would do it. Will there be any impact for Team Trump? Because if you ask people across America, they may agree with his nonsense lie.
Well, no, I mean that's because we've defined deviancy down with the Trump administration, that we're used to sort of the court of King Donald, his sons and courtiers and so on. By the way, this is the same story with Saudi Arabia. When you put your son-in-law in charge of foreign policy with Saudi Arabia, and then you catch moral laryngitis, as my colleague Frank Bruni put it, you shouldn't be surprised. You know something? Ann Coulter did give the president one terrific piece of advice back in 2016. You cannot
hire your family.
You can't hire your family for important jobs like these, because your son happens to be not a young guy. He happens to be an idiot who wanted to collude with a foreign government to subvert an American election.
Okay, well, let's go back to the court of public opinion, because we do have midterms coming up, and we do have a large swath of this country that supports the president. The president was asked by the AP about Michael Cohen, and he said, absolutely, he's lying. And Michael Cohen was a PR person who did small legal work, very small legal work. And what he did was very sad when you look. By the way, he was in trouble. He was in trouble for what he did for me. He was not in trouble for what he did for me. He was in trouble for what he did for himself. You do know that. It has to do with loans, mortgages, taxi cabs, and various other things if you read the paper. It's amazing to me that the president is citing the paper when he thinks most papers are outright lies. What do you think of the president's argument here? We could all say this is nonsense, but is it? Does it work?
Well, first, I think the arguments are already in the body politic, so it's already been discounted into the election. This is not going to move anything. Obviously, it's not true. He was the in-house lawyer. He was the principal go-to guy for Donald Trump. On the other hand, I don't know why the president's wasting his breath, because, frankly, Michael Cohen doesn't have the credibility to testify in a traffic violation. So the president is trying to dissemble the guy, and he doesn't need dissembling. He's just simply not a credible witness. The president's making his problems worse by building him up by misrepresenting who he was. He was his lawyer. He was his consigliere in-house. That's who he was.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.